Hey everybody, it's Andrea. Today, this episode is just as current as it was 30 years ago. Split pea soup is a poor option, and we ask the question, when isn't Riker DTF? Stick with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, this week we are talking Season 5, Episode 17, entitled The Outcast. This episode was written by Jerry Taylor and directed by Robert Shearer. Riker falls in love with Soren, a member of an androgynous race that finds gender specificity unacceptable. Now, I don't super remember this episode, kind of like last week, where I'm like, I remember some stuff from it, but not really a lot. What were your initial thoughts on this episode?
Oh, same. I remember kind of the moral of the story of this episode. And I remember like the last scene, or the second to last scene, I should say. But I don't remember any of the rest of it. Like, I don't remember how they came across this alien race. I don't remember how Riker fell in love with Soren or any of the other details. So for me, this was kind of like a first watch. I do remember the feelings associated with this episode, similar to last week. Last week, I just had like a vague feeling about it. And I just remember this episode being a really good episode. And I do think about it often. I have thought about it often over the years, but I haven't actually put it in my rewatch list. I usually skip right over it because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, because I remember the moral of the story. I'm like, yeah, I remember the moral of the story of this one. And I kind of go to the next one, where, you know, something like Conundrum, where I just watch over and over and over and over, or Next Phase, where I watch over and over and over.
Power Play. Yeah, totally. That was me. Like, I just remember being like, cool, it's an androgynous race, which even going into this episode, I was like, I love that we're talking about this episode. I feel like it's even more pertinent. I love that we're talking about this episode, and I feel it's even more pertinent today than it was like 30 plus years ago. I don't remember much from the episode first going into it, but I do remember it was seen as like an alien race that we'd never experienced, like androgyny. But now our understanding of like gender fluidity just makes this episode all the more current, which I was like, cool, like looking forward to jumping into this one.
Yeah, totally. And I felt like this episode was really a response to the public opinion about homosexuality at the time that it was filmed, which was in the early 90s. This was filmed in 1992. And back in the 80s, the AIDS epidemic was just sweeping through the United States, and it was decimating homosexual communities, like just decimating. And so it was thought of as a homosexual disease, quote unquote, until it just eventually spread to everybody. And it's just like something that anyone could get. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of understanding about it because it was new, similar to what we've experienced, you and I, Andrea, recently to the history of this recording with our last pandemic. But it basically was a global pandemic, and everybody was terrified. People didn't know where it was coming from or how to combat it. And it was extremely awful in the way that disease would destroy human bodies. Like there were all kinds of crazy side symptoms that made people really afraid. And that was in the 80s. So now you fast forward to the 90s, and now we have whole movements of things of people saying like, it's the homosexual's fault, or I don't know, just all kinds of weird things. And then people
the whole like this is God's answer to like homosexual sin or something,
like
and you're like,
it's a punishment, or like it's or like, you know, or like homosexuals were the source of it, in the same way that our recent pandemic of COVID, recent to the recording of this, people were saying like, oh, it's all China's fault and it's a Chinese disease, and you know, that was thanks to our president starting that little bit of thought. But totally, at the time, I think this was a very actually, at the time in the early 90s, it wasn't as bad as it was in the 80s. In the 80s, it was really bad. But this was still a subset of society that was under a lot of persecution. And I think that's what this episode was kind of made for, was to bring out this other idea of, what if things were different? What if things were different from how we see it? And let's put it in a totally alien context so we can just see what this issue is without our pre-informed biases
from the outside.
And ideas and values. Yeah, let's just see what it is totally from the outside, without anything we've experienced or anything anyone's told us or what our parents have said or what our community members have said. Like, let's just back up and look at this issue. Now, fast forward to today, it's talking about kind of gender not even being a thing. Like, we don't need any kind of just agendered people. And in our current climate, it's a very hot topic. So
yeah.
this episode became relevant all over again for a subset of society that is like still finding its way into mainstream. So this is just a great episode.
I agree with you as well. Like, I was really excited to get into this episode because I was like, wow, this is like so current with like what we are seeing now and like what our understanding of, you know, gender fluidity, transsexuality, gender roles, binary, non-binary. I think you're right. Like, you know, I remember seeing this episode when I was little and being like, cool, it's an alien race that doesn't have boys or girls. That's weird. You know, like just looking at it through the lens of a little kid. And looking at it today, I was like, whoa, this is so great. Like the language that they used 30 some odd years ago to write this episode and express like the viewpoints of like the Janai and the Federation. It's like, it's still like pertinent today. The only term that really wasn't used was they, them as a gender pronoun.
A pronoun, right? Because they didn't have options. So at the time they were just like, we have a word, but it doesn't translate, which makes sense that it wouldn't translate because we don't have a word in English for it. So it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I really, really love this episode. What do you say we just jump right in?
Let's do it.
Cool. So the Enterprise is working with this androgynous race called the Janai to investigate a shuttlecraft of theirs that's gone missing. And they get to the designated coordinates, but like there's no shuttlecraft. And they're like, oh, that's kind of weird. You know, I don't remember much of this episode. When I watched this today to talk about it, I was like, I don't really remember any of this. I don't remember what the circumstances are that brings this androgynous race to the Federation, whatever. Data does detect some unusual neutrino emissions and they launch a probe and the probe is like transmitting black. Like, and I was like, is it a black hole? Some sort of cloaking something?
Time,
like what?
Space continuum rip?
Something. And they come up with this super cool null space theoretical hypothesis. And I was like, whoa, we get like a new term. They sort of figured out that like with the creation of a new star system, some turbulent regions of magnetic and gravitational fields may develop. And these fields can develop into abnormal pockets of space. And it can absorb electromagnetic energy from anything that enters it, like a shuttlecraft or that probe. And the energy around it is bent, so it sort of naturally cloaks it, so you don't see it.
Until I was like, run into it, which is terrifying. Basically, it's until a Bermuda Triangle in space.
Completely. And I was like, what a cool, elegant explanation as well. They just did this like 3-sentence explanation and everybody goes, that's exactly it. Everybody goes, that's it. All right. And like, we're convinced. I was like, cool. Great.
I was
null
totally
space.
Convinced. I was totally convinced.
I was like, the math checks out.
Yeah. So we see, we kind of start with this discovery on the Enterprise bridge, but in the next scene, we see them on the Janai's planet and we see, them explaining this to their scientists. And so the solution that Riker proposes Geordi has come up with is that they take another shuttle from the Enterprise and they magic it. They add some kind of special technology
retrofit it some way. Yeah.
They jerry-rig it so that it will have enough energy to last for a little while inside the pocket. It won't immediately lose all power. And they have just enough energy inside of that shuttle to transport out the crew of the shuttle the Janai crew that went missing, which it's 2 crew members, and they figure out through their understanding of their shuttlecraft and their backup systems and whatever, that even though it shut down their shuttlecraft that went missing, that they still have 10 days of life support based on whatever technology backup systems should still be running. So I was like, oh, that's handy, because otherwise, like, what an awful way to die.
Just to asphyxiate within minutes.
Oh my gosh,
like,
awful,
oh my God.
Awful. But they have a solution of sorts. That part I was a little less clear on, but whatever. They have some kind of solution.
I know. I was like, you're going to take an electromagnetic shuttle into an EM desert
vacuum, but it's going to work still.
And it's okay. So do you remember last week I was talking about with the Worf surgery issue? I was like, I'm glad they didn't just 24th century magic wand it and magic a problem away.
Yeah.
They kind of did that with this one a little bit, but okay.
They kind of did it, right? They kind of were like, we could
just
magic it, but then also we could also die. So they did throw in some like, but this might not work-ish to it, but it wasn't as clean as
it might not
week's.
work-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, last week's was very clean. Like the explanations, you're like 100% I get it. This week, every time they explain the shuttle again, I wrote in my notes, wait, now how are they going to do this? Like, I mean, like, but I don't understand. Wait, they're going to go in and then come back out. Oh no, they're not going to come back out. Oh, they're going to go in and they're going to beam them out. Wait, how are they going to beam them out when they can't come back? Wait a minute, but they can't even communicate with the ship. How are they going to beam if they can't communicate where they need to be?
How are they going to know when to beam?
There was like a lot of question marks going on, but whatever.
Yep.
That's not even the point of this episode, clearly. That's the B plot. The B plot is people are going to die within 10 days, and we don't know what exactly they went missing. So we've got less than 10 days to figure this out. In the meantime, Riker partners with this Genii scientist named Soren, who we actually don't find out Soren's name till halfway through the episode. There was not even a name mentioned. And I was like, why doesn't this person have a name? And then eventually we get a name and I'm like, okay, kid. Because we did have one episode before where we had a character who had no name throughout the entire episode all the way to the end. So I was like, is this going to be that?
You're like, Jerry.
Yeah. But then I thought, well, but maybe that makes sense because their conversations are all about pronouns and whatnot. And we can't call this person a her or a him or a name. So I thought that's really interesting. But they didn't have a name.
As they're working together, Riker does stumble over these gender pronouns because Riker's talking about another member of the Genii science team. And Riker's like, well, do you think he will have an answer to us by XYZ time or something like that? And Soren is like, he? And I like that Riker says the thing that we all would be thinking if we were to meet a race that has no, let's say like an alien race that has no gender or has something that like we identify with closely as like, for the most part, some genders, but like they don't, it's like, well, what is the right word? And I love that Riker always comes from it in the most respectful of terms. Like, you know what? I've been really stumbling around with words the last couple of days. We've been working together. I want to make sure I get this right. What pronouns do you use? Do you use it? Like that for us seems very disrespectful. And Soren says that the Genii do have a gender neutral pronoun, but it doesn't have a human translation. And it's like, okay. And they kind of work together and they get to...
And I can relate to Riker too, because I've had friends who identify as non-binary, but when I met them, they identified as binary, right? So like I met them, they were female. I met them, they were male, and they identified as male. And then later on, they were like, no, from now on, I'm they. And it's like, I will try my best to do that. And just letting you know, I may slip because now I have this long habit of every time I see you and talk to you, I use this pronoun.
Yes.
So I've had that conversation. You and I are teachers. So, we both have several students in that position. And I've told every single one of those students, like, just so you know, I am going to do my best. And I apologize in advance because I will probably make some mistakes. But, feel free to correct me and I will continue to try to be on that. So I totally relate to Riker's being like, how can I do this respectfully? And I'm probably going to F it up. Sorry about that.
And Soren was very much like, don't worry about it. This is, we're two very different alien races. We're working together. I'm sure it'll be fine. And they finish up their work and they go to 10 forward and Riker gives Soren his dad's split pea soup. And I thought that's kind of a risk because split pea soup is something you either really like or you kind of really don't like. Also, it's green and lumpy and mushy. So to a race of people who have never seen or tasted split pea soup, even if you're a human who's never seen or tasted it, it's like, what are you giving me?
But you can have the same argument for
feels
any
a little
food.
Weird.
You could do that for any food when I think about it, even ice cream or bread or anything. If you've never seen this alien dish, the textures, the colors, the flavors are all alien.
I think you're right to a certain extent, but I do love gastronomic anthropology. I love that because I love to cook. I actually have some garlic confit focaccia bread like rising in the oven right now. Like I love to make stuff.
Of course you
do. My whole house smells like garlic and rosemary and olive oil and it's amazing. Anyway.
Vampires beware.
So I always think about food and like how food tells a cultural story.
Yes.
And how across most Earth cultures, like you have some sort of bread, kind of like a starchy bread. You have some kind of either like a rice or a pasta. You have like all, many cultures have some sort of, I think of like my mom is Colombian, like Colombian empanadas, which is just sort of a dough around some like meat and vegetables, right? That's fried.
You have some kind of protein.
Yeah, like some protein and starch and vegetable kind of it. encompassed in some kind of dough and fried or baked. In Italy, they have calzones, which are just like giant versions of that. In Peru, they have other versions of that, but they're baked instead of fried. In China, they have dumplings, which is the same thing, right? Where it's like, obviously, because there's been cross-culture exchanges, a lot of foods, like Marco Polo discovered noodles when he went to China and then brought them to Italy. And then that's how Italy got noodles and pasta. But like, there are a lot of like similarities between different cultures where it's like, oh, that's your bread version. This is our bread version or our starch version or our meat version or whatever. But I feel like
split pea soup doesn't tell the story of humanity.
I kind of feel like it doesn't. It's just
I can't argue with you there.
I feel like, can we start with like, I actually wrote like, can we start by maybe something that's like fairly universally beloved? Like, let's get Troy in here and introduce Soren to some chocolate ice cream, right? Or something. Or like
even
pasta,
bread. Like you said, bread. That's a very, like, there's so many
like,
different ways to do bread, and bread's solid. Like you could definitely.
And who hates bread? Yeah. You know?
Some people hate bread because bread hates them. Like I get that, but for the people who don't have allergies and whatnot, like my goodness, but bread's delicious.
Even if bread hates your body, you don't hate bread. You're just like, I can't eat it because my right, you're bummed. But pea soup, I was like, this is kind of a lot, right? You're sort of hitting Soren with a lot right now.
I never thought of that because I'm not into gastro, whatever you said.
Gastronomic
anthropology, but
gastropology maybe.
I'm not into gastropology. Like you are. However, that's a really good point. And I never thought about food telling a story, cultural story, like in this context. Never thought about that before. And you're right. Split pea soup does not tell the story. In this context, it tells no story at all.
It tells the only story it tells is maybe Riker's upbringing, where it's like, this is my dad's recipe.
Right,
this is what we
it keeps you warm in Alaska. But, could we have done sushi? Could we have done, which again is like really weird for like your first, however, it tells a story. It's very much like because of fish and because of it tells a story, and you're absolutely right. And split pea soup is kind of it's almost like tomato soup. Like, I want to introduce you to earthling food. Here's some tomato soup. And you're like, tomato soup?
It's extremely acidic and it'll upset the shit out of your stomach. And if you so much as have a little nick on your gums,
on your clothes,
it's gonna burn like hell. Yeah. It's like, what kind of Klingon blood wine are you giving me? Anyway, so they end up discussing the differences between like gendered humans and gender fluid Janai. And I think it's such an interesting conversation that was written exceptionally well. Soren is like, well, what are some differences between males and females? Like, what are some physical differences? And, he kind of does the childhood rhyme of like, girls are sugar and spice and everything nice, and boys are snips and snails and puppy dog tails or something like that. And Soren is like,
literally the worst explanation ever.
You have a dog's tail. Yeah. I was like, don't do that, Riker.
Yeah. Like, let's not introduce metaphor at this point.
No. This is not the time.
Specific with what's different.
Vaginas do XYZ, right? Let's just keep it really, really like very specific. Scientific. Yeah. So Riker does say like men tend to be bigger in bodies, have more kind of muscle mass on their upper bodies. Men cannot carry birth, though. They can't carry their young like the women do that. He asks Soren to describe like life on a planet where one experiences life as like both genders or maybe neither. And he's like, well, who leads when you dance? And Soren is like, whoever's taller, stuff like that, where I think
which
that
makes sense too. You're like, sure, why not?
Why not? It's the most parsimonious answer. It's just the simplest, most obvious explanation is probably the one. That's it. And that's it. And I love that Soren says this at one point. And then at some point, Riker and Dr. Crusher later kind of say this too, where Soren is like, I've never had to think about describing what my life is like as androgynous person. I just am. And like Riker and Crusher both kind of say that, where Soren is like, well, what's it like to be a man, or what's it like to be a woman? And they're like, I just am. I've never had to think about like what it feels like, which is like, this is really, really cool. Very cool conversation. Except that Soren's like team leader, Krite, arrives and kind of gives like some stink eye to Soren. And suddenly Soren is like much more formal and distant. And it reminded me of the Conundrum episode where Troy you know, where everybody was in like the brain wipe, and Troy was like trying to be really sweet with Riker, and they were being sweet with each other, and then Ensign Ro walks in, and she's like, "I'll see you later. Thank you for the book on tape. Have a pleasant and professional day." Like, that's what it felt like to me. I was like, "Oh,
yeah." She immediately stands up and she's like, "Great, please take my chair. I will see you later on, Commander. Good day, sir." And just like walks off, and you can see Riker looking like, bye, okay,
yeah."
And Crate's just looking back and forth like, what's going on here? And that was like, to me, I wanted Riker to pick up on that body language and be like, okay, why is Crate so interested in us having dinner? But whatever, like it was very subtle. Like, we notice it because we're supposed to, but he just notices that Soren just got weird and left, and it was like, okay, well, okay. So they just kind of move forward. Next thing you know, they're on the shuttle, and they have this plan to map the pockets by using some harmless phaser fire. Again, it's a little bit techie magic, but they're going to map the pockets. Go ahead.
I feel like they kind of gave a little explanation about it that I was like, oh, okay. What they were going to do was kind of go around the perimeter, what they think the perimeter was, since it's invisible.
Right.
And fire harmless phaser fire into that space. And wherever it disappears, the computer is going to map the point at which it disappeared. So if you fire like 1,000 shots at it from all different angles, you can kind of map out like it disappeared here, 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 here. So now you know it has this sort of shape or that kind of shape. And I was like, cool, okay, like that's actually a brilliant idea. That's really cool. Like it gives us kind of like a real world idea of like what you could do if you don't know the size or shape of something, and like ways to figure it out.
It is interesting. Cool. It is interesting. And also, what are they going to do with that information? Like, is that going to tell them how far, like, what's that going to tell them? Because they still don't know where the shuttle is inside of this pocket.
Right. But if the pocket of space is ginormous, then they're like, okay, we're going to have to break this down by quadrants and maybe try searching, whatever. But if it's like a relatively small pocket of space, maybe the size of like 10 shuttlecrafts, it's like you can easily go in and just see it from wherever you are. But if it's like the size of a continent, it's like, okay, now we got to like come up with another plan.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So they're in the shuttle, they're doing that. And Soren, whose name we still don't know at this point, because all of my notes is like the Janai ? Like all of my notes say that. And then, and then later on it's like, oh, that's her name. And we find out later she kind of goes by her. But at this point, we don't know. So it's just the Janai in my notes. So at this point, they're mapping out the pocket, and Soren asks Riker about his sexual organs. She's like, tell me about your sexual organs.
Typical water cooler chit chat.
Yeah, the huge. So Riker's like,
we're in the middle of a mission, kind of.
Real. Yeah. I wrote in my notes so many times, time and a place, Soren, time and a place. But
if you're really curious and you don't know, it's like, sure, you could just kind of ask whenever.
Yeah, sort of. But also, well, I thought like in her culture, or in Soren's culture, this topic probably is not an awkward topic, and it just isn't. It just isn't. So asking it wouldn't seem inappropriate at all. It's just different in different cultures, right? So that was kind of my excuse for it, is that this wouldn't be a weird question to another Janai, but was a weird question to Riker. But Soren picks up on Riker's hesitancy and is like, was that an inappropriate question? Like, can I not ask that? And Riker's just like, not at all. Not at all. Like, basically, ask me anything. I'm an open book. And he just says, but there are some things we just don't bring up in casual conversation, but I'll absolutely tell you. And he does go on to tell her whatever she asks, which I thought was really mature.
Very generous. Yeah, very generous of Riker.
Really,
He does say, like, for humans, the sexual act brings closeness and intimacy. It can be very pleasurable. And it turns out that the Janai inseminate a husk that they've kind of developed over the eons as being like the most low risk way to propagate their species. And sexual activity, the way that we know it, is seen as like offensive. It's primitive. It's not very involved.
I think actually what Soren said was that the carrying the baby part, they do it in the husk because it's the most low risk. However, all the pleasure that happens before the insemination of the husk, it's all like the same or better.
It's the same.
Yeah, or even better because Soren was like, it goes on for a long time. It's extremely pleasurable. It's really adventurous. We do all kinds of stuff. And then at the end, we inseminate the husk. So that part's not that sexy. But all the other parts are really good. And I was like, I bet Riker would get down with this. Like, if he was down with that foot washing ceremony, I think he would be totally down with the Janai ceremony, with their whole mating ritual. I think he would be so down for it.
The way I picture the Janai inseminating a husk is like two people turning the keys to the nuclear code. Like, you have to look at each other and be like, 3, 2, 1, do it. And they both turn the key or whatever. It's like that kind of like business.
I pictured it like sea creatures, like fish or something. I pictured it like the female comes along, it's like bloop, bloop, bloop. And the male comes along,
leaves
like,
eggs.
Please. And then they just go, they're like, all right, bye. Best of luck. Wish you all the best.
So I'm gonna ask our audience, how do you guys think? How do you picture that the Janai would inseminate a husk? I want to know. Either message us at the TNG Podcast on Instagram or info@thetngpodcast.com. Drop us an email. I really would love to know, because I was like, this is some non-romantic turning of like the nuclear key to launch an attack or something. Like, two people have to do it and they have to be far apart.
That's exactly what Riker said. Riker was like, well, our way is way better. And that's when Soren was like, I don't know, our way has a lot of stuff going on. And I was like, ooh, I think Riker would be like, tell me more about this mating ritual that you have. But at that exact moment when they're getting into the good stuff, one of their nacelles bumps a little edge of the pocket, which is why it's really, really good that they're mapping these pockets for moments like this, so they don't accidentally bump the thing when they don't mean to.
Yep.
And the engine goes down. The shuttle starts flying off wildly off course. Riker's, calming Geordi, like, get us out of here. And Geordi's like, okay, we're going to tractor beam you. And in all of this chaos, Soren gets injured. She gets like tossed like a rag doll in the shuttle. And that's when Riker turns and goes, Soren! And I was like, that's the name Soren. Like, it's at that moment when we finally hear this person's name. And next scene, we've got Soren recovering in sickbay. So it seemed like a very minor injury, which is good.
Yes.
Because we need Soren for this mission. This is like really important. These two people are in there dying. We don't know how many days it's been.
Yeah. It's been at least a couple of days, because they've had a dinner and a breakfast and like a something. Yeah.
And I think Riker said over the past couple days that we've been working together. So it's been some days.
Exactly. It's been a few days.
I want them to look more stressed out than they do.
I know. Right? It's like people are literally laying there unconscious with no hope of survival unless you get them out. You might want to step on it.
Yeah, let's talk about genitalia after we rescue them.
Yeah, and then I'll give you all the PowerPoint slides. In sickbay, Beverly is treating Soren's concussion, and Soren asks Beverly what it's like to be a female. And this is that moment where Beverly says, being a female is just who I am. Like, I never thought of what it's like. And that actually made me kind of pause and be like, what does it feel like to me to identify as like a cis hetero female? And I was like, it doesn't feel like anything. It feels like regular life, right? And I was thinking, if somebody like Soren came along and asked me these questions, I don't know how I would answer. I think I'd answer the same as Beverly, which is like, I don't know. It's just what I am. It's like the Trill being like, why would I ever tell you I'm Trill? Like, I just am. That's just part of who I am, right? So Soren does ask which gender is superior. And Beverly says that in the past, women were seen as weak and inferior, and that hasn't been true for a long, long time. And all I could think of in this moment, Shereese, was how meta that must have been for Gates McFadden to recite those lines, knowing full well that she was cut from season 1 of TNG because there were, quote, too many women on the show when there were 3 of them. And knowing how women are treated in Hollywood with the whole casting couch and all of that shit, even today, must have been infuriating to recite that line and be like, but we've solved that long ago. And it's like, and like Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Troy, saying that like she's had to tell costumers and like producers and stuff to literally get their hands out of her uniform and off of her like her bare breasts, because they're like, I just need to adjust you real quick in the uniform. And she's like, you're groping me, get off of me. It's like, oh my God. So
yeah, super, super painful. Thinking about that question of what it's like to identify as a woman or whatever way that Soren might have meant it.
Yeah.
I think similarly, in the sense that what is it like to be a woman, just isolated, that question isolated, there's maybe not a lot of answers because it's like, I don't know, it's just my normal life. But I can give a lot of answers about what it's like to be a woman of color living in the United States, based exclusively on how I am treated by other people in the United States. So my experience as a woman is, I can point to lots of things. Like I can describe my experience perfectly, but what it means to me to be a woman, outside of the context of how I'm treated, like I don't think I would have an answer for that because exactly what you said. It just kind of is. It just is. I agree with you. I think it's a really big question. And I also agree with you that reciting that statement, I don't know what Gates McFadden maybe was feeling when she said this, and hopefully she wasn't feeling anything. She was just doing her job. I hope that. Yeah. But I think the idea behind the writing of that line was someday we want to create a future where there is true equality. I think that was like the mission statement of this whole episode was like, someday we want to create a world that actually has equality. Now, ironically, in the very next scene, we see Worf being super sexist, but like I wasn't surprised. Racist. He's a Klingon. Like that is kind of how they are. However, the Klingon women are not weak at all. The Klingon women are hardcore warriors. So it was tough as nails. It was a little. Like on one hand, you're like, oh, I could see him being sexist because he's all like, but then on the other hand, you're like, but no, because I don't think Klingons would be like that because they're very. I agree. The women are just as strong and powerful and clever and cunning and everything as the men. So
I agree. It was a little bit off brand. It was a little off brand for Klingon to say that because not the really women are just as well, because they needed somebody to be the voice of the other who doesn't approve of this kind of thing. And if this was written as allegorical for like, homosexuality in the early 90s, there were lots of other voices saying this was okay, this was a sin, this is a whatever. So we needed somebody to be that dissenting voice. You needed that other voice, right? So he's playing poker with Data and Crusher and Troy, and the game is Starfleet Day or something like that. And Worf is like, why Starfleet Day? And Troy's like, well, because Starfleet was founded in 2361 or whatever date. So like 2, 3, 6s, and aces. Thank you. 2s, 6s, and aces are wild. And he's like, this is a woman's game. It has like too many handicaps, basically, like too many wild cards. You only need wild cards if you have a weak hand. Like a man's game wouldn't have any. And poor Dr. Crusher was like, and I just came from giving this whole speech about how like this is no longer a thing in like gender norms. And he's like, well, who are you saying that to? And she's like, one of the Janai. And he's like, the Janai. I don't approve of them. I don't approve of having no genders. Doesn't make any sense. And like, and he really had no legs to stand on, right? It was like, why not? Well, back to our game. Like there was just there was nothing. He said like, that's like, what? Why do they bother? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, and that's what a lot of bigotry is. Yeah. They bother me. Why? I don't know. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just it's just an other. It's just an other. It's just an otherness. It's just a xenophobia kind of thing. So when he's really called out on it, like in a very gentle way, because Deanna is the MVP of the season, as I said last week, and Dr. Crusher is just freaking awesome all the time. Yeah. And like, neither of them are offended whatsoever by their comments or behaviors. They're like, they're just dealing the cards. Yeah, they're just like, okay, Worf. When they call him out on it, he quickly changes the subject back to the game. So it's like, come on, Worf, like, you have no leg to stand on. Now, here's where some really good stuff starts to happen, I think, in my opinion. In the shuttlecraft, Soren and Riker are working on making repairs, and Soren reveals that they find Riker attractive. And Soren gives us a sort of history of the Janai, where way back when, the Janai did have binary genders. And it sort of gradually moved towards an androgynous race. But there are those who are born different, and they are throwbacks to a time where gender existed. And Soren has identified as female in secret since childhood. And it's illegal on the Janai homeworld to identify as a binary. So those who identify as binary like have to live in secret. If any of them are discovered, they're like surgically and psychologically altered to like return. They like basically like pray the gay away, sort of like they do these like alterations to like quote unquote cure them. And I was like, oh my God, even if you take out the allegory for homosexuality and you look at, not people who identify today more openly as non-binary, and people are just culturally, we're just sort of at the beginning of understanding this. I was like, what a wonderful inversion of our own planet. When looking at something that seems so different, we realize exactly how similar we are. Like in many nations, homosexuality is punishable by death, never mind being non-binary or gender fluid or asexual or anything. Like in a lot of countries still today in 2022, homosexuality is literally punishable by death. Like many, many people still believe that there are only two genders, and those who identify as anything other than that are ill or need to be cured or have issues in some way. And it's like, I thought it was a beautiful inversion where like, oh no, if you have a like binary gender that you identify as on Janai, you're sick, you have to live in secret, you can't be discovered. But like, think about that even 20 years ago here as non-binary. Like, this is exactly how people have had to live.
I mean, I feel like we didn't have the term non-binary 20 years ago.
No, but surely people existed who were like, I feel like I was born in the wrong body or something.
Or just, like, I don't really feel like either one. It'd be like, what does that even mean? And you're like, I don't know. I like the same thing. I don't know. That's just how I feel. I feel like neither gender really resonates. I don't really know what that means. Because the term non-binary is actually relatively new for me. I don't remember hearing that word ever as a kid.
Even like in the 5 or 8 years ago, I don't think I remember hearing it. Yeah, it's a very new term.
I agree. So this episode was very much ahead of its time. And Soren tells a story about being a small child and having another child at the school who preferred being male, who had a preference of being male. Yeah. And this child was bullied and beaten and eventually taken in for psychotherapy. After being beaten, the administrators were like, oh, this child must have been beaten because they think they're male. Yeah, because they're different. Not like, why did these other kids beat somebody? Like, that's not okay. It was like, oh, there must be something wrong with the kid who got beaten. So they took him, he identified as a him. They took him for therapy. And then when they returned, they were quote unquote cured and so happy to no longer be a him and to fit in with society. Now, I will say, looking at this episode as an outsider, it's like horrific. Yeah. And I understand it from the point of biology. Like, this is how society works. Society works by creating a bunch of rules that everyone agrees to. And if you don't agree to those rules, you exit that society. Yeah. So there are all kinds of rules. I mean, there are legitimate laws that societies make, but there are also many more just unspoken, unwritten rules. Yeah. Of how people behave, of hierarchies, of how do we treat government, of how do we treat children, how do we treat, like, all this stuff. There's so many rules that make a society what it is. And in order to change a society's values or beliefs, it usually takes a lot of time and a lot of inciting incidents for things to happen. And then the cultural shifts happen and then new rules get written. So I do understand it from the point of society being cohesive, that they're trying really, really hard to keep everybody the same. They don't want anybody falling outside of the societal rules that they've decided, everyone has decided everyone's going to agree to. Yes. So I do understand it biologically, but ethically and emotionally, it's really horrific. And I can imagine Soren being like, well, I'm not telling anybody that I identify as female ever. Like, even taking the risk to seek out males, people who identify as male in her society, to me is such a risk, because I just feel like, what if they're a double agent? What if they're going to tell you? I don't know. It just seems very scary.
100%.
Very scary.
That is what I feel the level of persecution has to be, and has definitely historically been, for those in the LGBT plus community who, let's say you live in a small town, you're a gay boy or girl or whatever, right? Or something. And like, you're wanting to find somebody like you. You want the companionship. You're lonely.
And
you want love.
How do you tell
and
people anything?
How do you do that?
Judged?
You have to become really, really good at like reading between the lines. But then it also becomes this like, are you reading between the lines and seeing who this person really is in secret? Or are you just hoping to see that, making a presumption and making a fucking fatal mistake and accidentally outing yourself to like the worst person who's going to like now spread your business all over town and everybody's going to know, and you're the social pariah. Like, it's a very, very scary thing. It's really scary. And it makes me truly sad that even like 30 years after this episode aired, parts of the world and even still parts of the US who are extremely against that.
Yeah.
Where like
things have not changed.
Things have not changed at all, if not even gotten worse. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. So that does break my heart.
It was a moving story.
Yeah.
And just terrifying. And I also just thought, I mean, well, at first when Soren confessed that
yes,
she identifies as she, and second confession that she is attracted to Riker.
Yeah. Well, girl, same.
Yeah, right? It's same. Yeah.
Get in line, Soren.
and then Riker's like, I had a feeling. It's like, of course Riker knew all along.
Yeah. Riker's radar is like, his attraction radar is like level 5 trillion.
It's extremely sensitive and it's always correct.
It's always correct. The answer is always yes.
The answer is always yes.
His magic 8 ball is always yes.
Always
they're into you.
Yes. There's only one option in his magic 8 ball.
Yeah. If you took it apart, every side of that dice would just say yes on it.
Some would say right now, question mark.
Yeah.
So, but at first when Soren does this, I was like, time and a place, Soren, time and a place. Maybe not when you're underneath the freaking hood of the panel with the little space screwdriver. Maybe finish this project first, go back to 10 forward or to quarters or something a little more not in the middle of this dangerous mission. But whatever. The conversation was good. And I guess maybe they were done. Because
they were done and they were alone.
So
and they were in kind of a small space where like nobody else was going to intrude.
It's better than 10 forward, I think, because 10 forward was kind of a risk for them to do that.
No, because Crate was going to come swaggering in and fuck everything up.
Ruin the whole
Crate,
moment.
by the way, Crate is the perfect name for that asshole. I don't know what it is, but it's the perfect name for that person. Anyway,
Crate kind of reminded me of, what was that punchable face from season 1 whose head exploded? Remick. Crate kind of reminded me of Remick, just in this like, why are you in everybody's business? Don't you have a job to do?
Don't you have shit you need to be doing on your own?
Why are you in 10 forward? That's my question. These two are taking a break, a much needed break from their hard work. What are you doing here? You need to go back to the planet.
People are allowed to eat together, Crate.
Yeah, God. But in any case, this was a beautiful scene, and Soren was kind of like, just think about it, Riker. And then like walked away. And I was like, Riker doesn't need to think about anything. The answer is always yes. Soren, where are you going?
And it's always right now. Yeah.
Yeah, where are you going? Come back. The answer is yes. But it was a very sweet moment.
I think it was. Now we get to kind of like the action climax of the B plot, and the shuttlecraft enters into the null space pocket piloted by Soren and Riker, and they immediately lose contact with the ship, which we knew was going to happen. They've been in there for like 2.5 seconds, and the shuttlecraft power is down to 84%. And then after like 6 seconds, it's down to like 32%. You're like, oh God, you guys have like 4 seconds to find this team and get them out of here. Now, they find the shuttlecraft, and really they just kind of look out the window and go, there it is, which I was like, thank God, because you're right. If it was a huge area, even like a city block, you wouldn't be able to see. Also, I did think it was interesting, a cool juxtaposition that when they went in it was white instead of black, where you're like, dang, that's kind of cool.
That was very Matrixy. I like that.
Yeah. So they find the shuttlecraft. They have this like couple unsuccessful attempts to beam the unconscious crew members over, which of course manages to like drain the shuttlecraft even more of energy. They manage to beam them on, and they do sort of this like rock star move, because now they're down to like 9%. They don't have enough to exit, and you're like, fuck, right? But of course Riker's like boop, 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 and he's like,
we're transferring all energy, all power from life support, from everything. We're transferring all power to the transporters,
and we're getting out of here,
because if we don't, we'll be dead within an hour. So we're just going to transfer, and we have no way to tell the Enterprise that we'll be dead within an hour. So we're going to transfer everything. And Soren's like, but if you transfer from this system over here, won't that make
no time?
Right, we have 13 seconds left in this conversation, and Riker's like, yeah, it will make the shuttle explode. However, we're going to die anyways if we don't get out of here. So, boop, 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 boop. It's set. Let's go.
Also, I'm sorry. There shouldn't be any sequence of buttons that you could push that's going to make a fucking shuttlecraft explode. Why is that on the menu?
I mean, maybe they're taking like power from the
maybe like an
field.
Overheat or something. Maybe like a warp core breach-ish.
Well, yeah, because they have a containment field that's like a force field. But if you take the power away from that, the whole thing would explode. So I'll buy that. I'll buy that they're rerouting all their power, including the stuff that's supposed to keep them from not dying. Like they're rerouting all the stuff that's going to cause them to die. But he's like, we're going to die anyways. And I thought like, yeah, this is kind of similar to last week's episode where Worf had the option between killing himself or doing a really ridiculously dangerous procedure that had a good chance of killing him. It's like, well, let's do the procedure.
Either way.
Yeah, it's like
probably
going to
end up dead.
Yeah, so this one, I was like, yes, I'm on Team Riker. Reroute everything. Reroute life support, lights, LEDs, whatever, support, reroute all of this.
Windshield wipers. Yeah.
Yes.
Everything.
Replicators. And we find out earlier, which I didn't know this, that shuttles usually don't have any kind of armaments. I was like, oh, but this one was fitted to have those photons just for the mapping. But I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because so many times, like when Geordi got kidnapped, we were like, he couldn't fire, but they powered down his ship. I didn't know they didn't even have any weapons, which I think they changed later, because I think shuttles have weapons later on, but here they said they
we'll
don't.
We'll have to keep track of that and see. Now they do end up like clearing the null space pocket and landing in sickbay, and all's well that ends well. And Krayt thanks the Enterprise and invites them to a reception of gratitude. And eyeballs Soren, obviously suspicious again. And on the surface, which is we get to see this beautiful little planet, Riker's sitting outside at this diplomatic thing. And Soren comes out and he's like, I'm just an outdoor kid. I don't really like doing indoors. I don't like doing big meetings. And I was like, you're kind of in the wrong job, but sure, whatever.
I thought the same. And Soren even brought that up. Soren was like, don't you do this all the time? And aren't you kind of used to it? And Riker's like, I grew up in Alaska, the great outdoors. Riker, we have never heard this phrase from you before. I just love the great outdoors and don't like being in parties. You were like Mr. Party.
On your downtime, you gotta come forward and you play the trombone. You don't go fishing in Alaska on the holodeck, but whatever. but Soren is like, would you like a tour of the botanical gardens? And our planet is really beautiful. Would you like me to show you around?
Plants. Yeah, I was afraid that Soren was going to start flirting with Riker right there with everybody else in that other room. And I was like, time and a place, Soren. Time and a place.
Time and a place.
Please do not start flirting.
Riker is like, I love exobiology. And as a biologist, I feel the same way. I'm like, ooh, some sort of other life? Cool. So as
Riker could not care less about exobiology.
No shit's given at all. He's like plant, animal. That's all I needed to pass.
That's what he was here for. He understood that little cue, which I thought was very wise of Soren to be like, let's go for a walk away from prying eyes.
Yes.
Because Kite is freaking stalking me. Staring at me right now.
Krayt the cretin is being an asshole right over here.
Is being a creeper. Get out of here. Why are you all in her business?
Krayt, aren't you in charge of a bunch of shit? Don't you have stuff?
Isn't this your party? Go greet Picard or something.
Go.
What are you doing?
Yeah, stop hanging around in doorways sniffing around for trouble. Anyway, Riker pulls Soren into a kiss, which is very sweet. And then, the next scene we see Riker goes to visit Troi to ask her advice. And this is something that's really sweet, but still I can't totally wrap my head around, because I don't think I would be visiting an ex that I still have feelings for to discuss the person I have more feelings for right now. And I was like, because they're not just friendly exes.
What if your ex was a counselor that was a therapist?
I feel like there's a lot of other therapists I could probably.
But on the Enterprise, it's just Troi. Okay,
I guess. I don't know.
There is the computer.
There is a computer, but Deanna is like, she doesn't really even advise him to do anything. They just kind of talk about their friendship, and he's like, I hope it won't change our friendship. She's like, it will, but that's what relationship dynamics are. They're constantly changing, but I'll always be your friend, and maybe even a better friend to you with this. And then they kind of have a little kiss that's like cute, but it's like a friend kiss. But I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be doing friend kisses when you're romantically kissing somebody else. But okay.
Can I just point out that I've never had a friend kiss like that? I don't kiss my friends on the mouth. Like none of them. Male, female, non-binary, don't care. Do not kiss my friends on the mouth. So that part, I was like,
I've had exes that I have maintained friendships with to some extent or another. Like, I'm not currently friends with any of my exes now, but like, throughout the years here and there, we did not kiss after we dated. But okay, but sure, Riker and Troi, fine, okay. But
that weirded me out.
It was just weird. But weird. Okay, so here's where the A plot climax starts to hit, and I was like, oh god. Riker goes to meet Soren because they have some wrap-up work to do, and Krayt is in Soren's quarters and
waiting for Riker. How weird is that?
Because Krayt is a cretin, okay, and informs Riker that Soren has been taken into custody. And this is literally the worst possible thing that can happen to Soren. It reminded me of watching Handmaid's Tale, where one of the women was discovered to be gay, and they rounded her and her partner up in a van and drove them to like some empty area and hung one of them to death from like a crane, like a construction crane,
Mm-hmm.
and like strung them up. And the poor woman had to like was like bound and gagged and screaming and crying and like watching this. And I was like, dear God, this is, oh my God, this is like the worst thing ever. So they have these proceedings, to put Soren on trial for daring to be different. And Riker storms into the proceedings and it's like, it's all my fault. It's all my fault.
I
I
loved
kissed
that.
Soren.
I love that.
I
It was
came
all
on
me.
to I came on to them, and he covers for Soren, and they're like, is this true, Soren? And Soren's like, no. And she is tired of lying to protect herself, and she does not need to be saved. She doesn't need to be, she's like,
She's just tired of living a lie. She's just so over it. She's been doing this since as long as she can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And now that she's been found out, which was her worst fear that people would find out. Now that they found out, Riker comes in and gives her a total out. And all she had to do was say, yes.
Yes, he did that.
He did that. And Riker would have had no consequences, and everything all would have been well. But she was just tired of living a lie, and she just couldn't do it anymore. And she was like, no, it's all false. And you just see Riker like, what? Soren?
No, don't do
what
that.
I said. Agree with what I said.
Yeah.
But then Soren gives this really great impassioned speech. Worth a watch just for this speech.
Okay. I love the speech. It's so beautifully and so perfectly written. I cannot possibly do it justice by paraphrasing it. So I would like to share the speech with you guys because it is exactly what any other or different people have had to deal with since the beginning of time.
I am tired of lies. I am female. I was born that way. I have had those feelings, those longings all of my life. It is not unnatural. I am not sick because I feel this way. I do not need to be helped. I do not need to be cured. What I need, and what all of those who are like me need, is your understanding and your compassion. We have not injured you in any way. And yet we are scorned and attacked. And all because we are different. What we do is no different from what you do. We talk and laugh. We complain about work. And we wonder about growing old. We talk about our families, and we worry about the future. And we cry with each other when things seem hopeless. All of the loving things that you do with each other, that is what we do. And for that, we are called misfits and deviants and criminals. What right do you have to punish us? What right do you have to change us? What makes you think you can dictate how people love each other?
So that just really, I mean, when I watched that, I was like, Soren says so many things in there that really resonate with me. Like, we have injured no one. What right do you have to change us, to prosecute us? You call us deviants. What makes you think you can dictate who we love and how we love? And I know people who are out as gay now, but have had to live very closeted lives with parents who suspected they were gay. And like, made them in air quotes, like act straight. So they had to like live a lie until they were like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Until they pulled a Soren.
Until they pulled a Soren. And like, she just said that with such grace and such dignity. It just blew my mind. It really did. It was really beautiful.
It was really beautiful. And immediately after she stopped speaking, the judge is like, take them into custody. It was just like, fell on deaf ears, because again, going back to this idea of societal norms, they do not want to rock the boat. They want everyone to be the same. And when Riker protests and is like, no, you can't do this. Wait. The judge says, I know we must seem really cruel to you after hearing that speech, but everybody wants to be quote unquote normal, right? Everyone wants to be normal. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone wants to fit in. That's what Soren really wants, even though Soren is now saying she's a she and all of this. Nope. Soren really just wants to be normal and fit in. And that is true to an extent. Like, everybody does need to belong. That is absolutely a human need. We have a need to belong in community. That is 100% true. The challenge is that this judge is saying that need can only be met by doing it our way.
In this one community.
In this one
there's
way.
There's only one way to fit in.
There's only one way to fit in. There's no other ways to fit in, and there's no other communities you can fit in. You have to fit in this one way. And if you choose to be different, we will have to go in and change your brain so that you will want to be like everybody else. Yeah. Which is it not only is it horrific, but it's so like anti-American, right? Because Americans are so about like independence and self-expression,
individualistic,
and very individualistic society that Andrea and I belong to. So the thought of being uniformed even to your sexual preferences is like, holy cow, like that is a lot of control that you just do not need to have over me at all. And then Riker makes all these great suggestions like, I'll take her with me, and then you'll never have to deal with her, and she won't be a bad influence on the rest of the society, and she can have asylum with us and all this stuff. And the judge is just like, thank you, but no. Soren really wants to belong to this society, and we're gonna help. We're gonna help Soren. That's what we're doing. We're helping. And I guarantee you, because we have a 100% success rate, that after the procedure, Soren will be happy.
That's the thing with the Arbiter. The Arbiter truly believes the Arbiter truly wants to help Soren and believes that this is the way to do it. And that's it. Yep. When Soren makes her beautiful speech, the Arbiter says, thank you, Soren. Admitting your perversion will make it that much easier to begin treatment. I was like, perversion? Ugh, like, excuse me. And she's led away, and she's like, and I was like, God damn it.
She just kind of walks. And I do feel like, I don't know what I would do in Soren's position. However, living your whole life as a lie, and you're like 30, and finally it's come out, I think I would just want to break too. One way or the other. Yeah. I just would be tired of the hiding and the fear, the terror. You're going to be found out every time she finds a lover. It's like, just, looking over your shoulder, hoping they're not a secret spy, hoping your boss doesn't find out and your family doesn't find out and your friends don't find out, and hoping nothing slips, and hoping you don't accidentally make a little look at somebody that you've been, you know what I mean? Just like all of that fear. At some point, I would be tired of it too. And I feel like this would be a relief. Although I wouldn't want to give up my identity, I would feel like just having people know on the record what I believe would be a relief. I'm
still Shereese, and this is who I am. I'm still the same person. I just don't want to hide anymore.
Yeah, even though it's like very short-lived, right? It's like a good 3 minutes where she gets to be herself, and then she's led away, and you're like, ugh. Well, and Riker is trying hard, and I thought all his solutions were valid. I was like, yeah, what about that? What about that? What about that one?
Come on, look at the Masterpiece Society, where like that scientist just got to do asylum. Like, asylum has been a thing. Yeah. Remember when Riker was discovered to not actually be an alien in that first Contact episode where he had sex with that super creepy
garbage episode? Yeah,
stupid ass episode. But like, some of those people got asylum because that scientist who discovered the truth was like, I can never unknow what I have discovered. And then like in Masterpiece Society, that scientist and like 26
Soren didn't even ask for it though. Soren was just like, didn't even fight. Was just like, whatever.
Well, I think she was just so like everything happened so fast. I was like, I don't even know what to say or do. Riker obviously goes to Picard, and of course Picard is like, there's nothing we can do.
Prime
it's
directive.
the old Prime Directive song and dance again. And Riker's like,
this time we're gonna agree with it.
Yep. And so he's like, God damn it.
Riker's like, thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Goodbye, sir. And you're like,
He does this whole like, may I be excused? And Picard's like, okay, like, you're clearly not going to hear anything I have to say.
Yep.
So what's the point of being like, and another thing, right? Worf comes by to quote, drop off our procedure for placing buoys around null space. But really it's to say, like, I know what you're going to do and I'm going to go with you.
Which is nice. This is a redemption of that nonsense from the beginning of the episode.
100%.
Which you're 100%. Right, does not align with Klingon culture and certainly does not align with Worf, because he thinks, if anything, he thinks Klingon females are like the best type of female in the world. Like, and he said that many times of like, oh, you know, human females can't handle me.
Beats a Klingon
like,
female.
Or all this stuff. Yeah. So like,
well, I think that himself,
it was, I think right here.
I think that is actually a really great way, because even if he doesn't approve of the Janai, he doesn't approve of being non-binary, he doesn't approve of being androgynous and not having genders, Riker is his friend more than he doesn't approve of the Janai.
Yeah.
Right. So he's like, I'll go with you. So they beam down to the planet. They use these little binoculars and they run around in the bushes and they play G.I. Joe and they knock out the guards and they take Soren. And she refuses to leave Janai. And as Riker's like, come on, let's go. We realize very quickly, like, it's too late. Like, they've already treated her and Soren is gone. And I was like, oh, which was super sad. I know, in a way, I was glad that they didn't go the whole asylum route again, because I'm like, okay, we've done asylum like 5 times this season. So I'm kind of glad they went a different route, but I was really sad that this was the route, though. I was like, it's too late. She's already like been treated in air quotes, like she's already been altered. She's already been like psychologically, surgically altered, and now she's like a blank template of the rest of them. I was like, oh
yeah. And Riker's like, well, maybe Dr. Crusher can undo whatever they did. Like, Riker's probably still holding out hope. He's still grasping at straws. He's not letting her go. But Soren is just like, why would I ever want to go back to that? I'm happy. And Riker's like, but I love you. And Soren's like, I'm sorry, and just walks away. And I feel like, again, Soren is actually happy. And the reason Soren is happy is because Soren is no longer Soren.
Yeah, because Soren is gone.
So Soren is happy. This new version that's been reconstructed to be non-binary is legitimately happy, but only because the Soren that was identifying as female is now no more. That Soren was miserable in this society. So it does make sense that there's 100% success rate with people being happy, because everything that makes them feel like they don't fit in is gone. And now they feel like they fit. They know that they fit in. They fit into the very core. So they have that sense of belonging while losing that sense of self, which is really heartbreaking.
It's really sad.
Yeah. Just to see Riker be like, but, and the Soren that he knew and loved is gone. So even if he did kidnap her and try to give her asylum and all that stuff, she's no longer even a her. And she doesn't have those feelings anymore for him.
She doesn't want to be there. Yeah.
He's
Soren
just like,
does not want to be there.
Yeah, he's just like a plant or a tree. Like, it's just like, yeah, whatever. You know, all the chemistry and connection and the secrets told in the shuttle and all of that's gone. It's really
all of that is gone. Yeah. And Soren still has like memory of doing those things, but it's like, I can't remember why I even wanted to do that. So I'm really sorry that I behaved that way. And I'm sorry if I led you on. I don't love you or anything. You know, it was really sad. And all Riker could do was just watch Soren walk away, who's no longer a she. She's back to being the pronoun that we don't have. We don't know. That we don't know, right? But we can say them. Back on the Enterprise, you know, Riker reports for duty back on the bridge. And I think Picard kind of acts like he doesn't know what happened. And off they go.
Picard very subtly asked Riker if he was able to say goodbye in front of the crew in just a really beautiful way. He goes, you know, we have this mission that we've been called to, but I wasn't sure. Yeah. He was like, I wasn't sure when I should tell them to expect us. Is our business with the Janai finished? And Riker's just like, yes. And he's like, all right. And synthetic course or whatever. I thought that was a really beautifully subtle way of being like, did you say goodbye? Is it over?
Yeah. 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 And I am convinced that like he just acted like he didn't know what happened, because
of course he knew.
He
knows his people.
Well, not even know, like, sure, he knows his people. And I mean, so much as a vase tips over and like scanners indicate like an unauthorized transport down to the surface. Come on. So they take off for the Phelan system for their next mission, Warp 6, and that's where it ends. And I gotta say, my final thought here is I really loved this episode so much. I don't think I would want it redone, but if we did redo this episode, like if we refilmed this episode today, the only thing I would change is that the cast be non-binary actors to like honor that. But otherwise, like, I mean, this episode is perfection in my mind. It's got the sci-fi aspect to it. It scratches that itch, but it's the human heart issue, you know, and I really, really love it. What is your final thought on this episode?
Yeah, I thought this was a really powerful episode that still seems just as relevant today as it was when it aired in 1992. And I am just deeply impressed by that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the writing was like sublime. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. All right. Well, guys, it's a little bit of heaviness in our heart that we take off Warp 6 for next week. But when we get there next week, we're talking season 5, episode 18, Cause and Effect. It's a super fun episode. We can't wait to break it down for you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.